where your business stands with no guesswork. Get instant, accurate reports so you can make smarter decisions. It's powerful enough for your accountant, simple enough for you. Try Xero today. Say hello to Xero. See exactly where your business stands with no guesswork. Get instant, accurate reports so you can make smarter decisions. It's powerful enough for your accountant, simple enough for you. Try Xero today.
At WGU, you decide when and where to learn with 24/7 online course access and
This capsule was filmed in some of the live studio work.
One thing most parents have in common is the fact that we want our kids to have a much easier life. Not having food to eat over to a test. Easy upstream of a tap water gives you a private imagination. And we all know God knew how to stick as a fishing card and true dedication to caring for the workers. At least that's what I tell myself when I'm doing things and I'm feeling very appealing. Thanks for you, too. I'm trying to see what real is so I can tell you what real is when you're hungry and ready to eat my food.
You know what I do? That's 3 days of the day.
You know, we see you, we see what you need to say. So feeding the food, so we have to do this food.
As far as I'm concerned, the man that raised you was my dad.
You know what I mean?
You know nothing about me. You know nothing about me. Good. You know, reach out to you, doing like, give a big shout out, to good. I did. I did. A lot of the underground ways, like, I've never established contact with anybody, with any of the, I just like, I see a lot of people like that. You see the outside. When America pulled back the curtain on God of War and Rocky, I don't think the biggest story was that Faye was getting her own game. We already knew who she is, right? We already know how important she is to Kratos and the Tank. The real story is what Corey Dialogue confirmed after that. That isn't just some standalone side adventure. This game is directly connected to the next main Kratos game. That's big, because for most people who are wondering if Ragnarok was really the end of Kratos' journey, or if Santa Monica was getting ready to move on. Now we have the answer. We already knew the answer. You don't diss Kratos ever. He is God of War, but he's not done. We'll be showing the next chapter in a different order, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Welcome to the channel, everybody. Jimmy Chaos. Today, we're talking about God of War 6, or the next main Kratos God of War, and how it all ties in together, updating you on everything that we know. Now, you think about it, actually makes sense here. Faye's always been the biggest mystery in the North Star. She somehow knew everything. She knew Kratos was lucky before anyone else. She knew Kratos would eventually have to change. She left behind the entire journey that ultimately led to Odin's downfall. Every major event in the Norse games traces back to choices Faye already made years before the story even began. And then we spent 2 days following the consequences of her actions without ever really seeing what she was doing behind the scenes. Well, now Santa Monica is going to give us those missing pieces, and according to dialogue, those answers aren't just about the past, they are setting up Kratos' future. So that immediately makes me think this thing is going to end with something that completely changes Kratos' future, right? Maybe Faye discovers a threat that's much bigger than Odin ever was. Maybe she uncovers something hidden inside the everyone that eventually does reach Kratos. Or maybe she leaves behind one final message that Kratos won't understand 10 years later. I don't know. Whatever it is, Santa Monica is telling us it matters enough that the next Kratos game is going to connect. That's really awesome. That makes me want to go through there's all kinds of questions. And if that's the case, do we get to do kind of like a Kratos Atreus thing from Ragnarok and God of War, or we get to do it with Kratos and Faye in the next God of War? I mean, there's a lot of options. I mean, but you also have the choice, right? Where was he when we left him? He walked away to search for the remaining giants to discover who he really was as Loki, and then Kratos stayed behind to become a different kind of god, a god that people actually wanted to follow instead of be scared of. They were separated for the first time in the entire series, and that ending always felt intentional. It felt like Santa Monica was creating 2 completely different paths that would eventually collide again. Well, what if Loki is the event that pulls those back together? What if whatever Faye discovers forces Kratos and Atreus to reunite much sooner than I even expected? Maybe Faye plays that through again and we don't get to see Faye and Kratos reunite, but I feel like that payoff is too good to ignore. And then we have Egypt. Let's be clear. Santa Monica has not confirmed the next Kratos game is going to Egypt. We need to separate facts from speculation here, but if you're looking at everything together, it's really hard not to notice where the break comes from. Loki introduces gods from outside the Norse mythology almost immediately. I mean, we've got segments from the Egyptian mythology, that's not a coincidence, and if everything really exists outside the boundaries of individual pantheons, then Kevin Kratos doesn't need some elaborate excuse to remix that anymore. The bridge was already there. Think about how clean that transition would be. Instead of Kratos randomly falling to another continent because another mythology exists, the story naturally expands because the worlds are already connected. So Faye experiences that first, and then Kratos experiences it next. Because of the franchise evolves without being forced. We already know there's time, like, parallel time moments in the trailer and in Ragnarok, right? Or was it 2018? I don't remember. But they're connected. They're literally kind of going through their things together, which means they can end up with the universe coming together. Honestly, Egypt makes the most sense. Even before the news week, Corey talked about Egypt being one of the things they can turn. Fans have wanted it for almost a decade. Visually, it's completely different from anything we've seen. We've got deserts, temples, gods like Ra, we've got Anubis, Horus, Seth, God, I mean, we've got all of them, right? So entirely new mythology waiting to be explored. So imagine what Santa Monica could do with modern hardware in one setting. It would feel completely fresh while still keeping everything in this God of War still God of War. I mean, God of War, Kratos. Ragnarok fundamentally changed who he was. For the first time in the franchise, Kratos is not driven by revenge. He's not trying to kill every single god he meets. He finally becomes the protector that Faye finds to be. So if another pantheon eventually enters the picture, I don't think Kratos starts the conflict. I think the conflict comes to him. Maybe another god sees what happens to Olympus and Asgard and he's Kratos to the time. Maybe Kratos has to rescue Faye. Or Kratos won't visit. He's Kratos. He was peace. The world is, of course, not going to allow that, or we wouldn't have God of War games. So it's compelling. It's better than here's another pantheon, go kill everybody, if you ask me. I mean, I feel like it's better. I mean, Santa Monica spent the last 2 games rebuilding Kratos into something he's never thought he would become. He's a father, he's a leader, he's a symbol of hope. So the next challenge, I don't think it should be whether he's strong enough to defeat another god. We already know he's going to kill God. We at Rockstar happy to announce that we will be showing an extended look at GTA 6 on August 27th, streaming on Netflix.
My name is Candace DeLong. I was an FBI agent for 20 years. I specialized in profiling and tracking violent offenders and serial killers. This is how crime works. There are certain crimes and certain people that I think even in their mid-80s in prison should never get out. I interviewed a female serial killer who was a nurse. She is responsible for the murders of 10 of her patients. Had she not been caught, God only knows how high the body count would be.
The GTA 6 extended look is coming on August 27th, and many people
About
might not realize what that
8% of
actually
all
means.
serial
An extended
killers
look is
are
more than
women.
just a trailer. It's even
And sometimes
categorized
they
as an
start
action
when
movie
they're
on the
teenage
Netflix
girls.
page. They wouldn't do that
Some
for a
female
90-second
killers
trailer like the ones we've
are
seen
very
before. And a
prolific.
glitch on
They
Netflix
may
possibly
kill
leaked that it's gonna be
many,
30
many
minutes
people
long, meaning
over
it
a
would be
few
by far
years.
the longest
And it's
promotional
astounding that
video
no one
Rockstar has
notices
ever released
something
for
might be
GTA.
amiss.
They expect to see
Serial
long
killers
previews
by
of real
FBI
gameplay,
definition
cutscenes, and a
is
deeper dive into the
3
game's world and
victims,
mechanics.
not all at
August
once.
27th is going to be
The
a big
series of
day for
murders that were
GTA fans. Are
eventually
you just as hyped
determined
as
to
I
have been
am? Let me know
committed
in
by
the comments.
Eileen Wuornos, the detectives were assisted by the FBI profiling unit. But this was also at a time when it was believed women were not violent serial killers. Our society wasn't ready to accept that women could be killers. Women were seen as the life givers, but Eileen Wuornos would hitchhike. Men would stop. She wanted a single male alone in that car. Sticks her thumb out, he lets her in the car, he ends up dead. She would talk him into pulling over. They could go have sex off the road, and that wasn't her intention at all. Her intention was to murder. And the interesting thing about Eileen Wuornos and her motivation, it appeared to me to be motivated, killing men by hitchhiking, was revenge, as well as financial gain. She was horribly sexually abused when she was a young girl. She had a very, very difficult childhood and adolescence. She killed 7 men. Had her lover not turned her in, she would have kept doing it. She was eventually convicted, sentenced to death, and executed. Female serial killers, like all serial killers, generally speaking, plan the murder. It's not a spontaneous thing. Sometimes the first murder wasn't planned, it happened, and then the killer realizes after the murder they got away with it. And perhaps they benefited in some way. And then they think, well, that was easy. Women use various methods when they kill people. A frequently seen method is poisoning. What makes murder easy for the poisoner, they have no trouble contaminating food or drink or anything else because chances are they live with the victim. It's rare for a female killer to torture and sexually assault their victim prior to killing them. We see that far more often in male serial killers. What I think is sadistic, however, is the female poisoner who puts enough poison in the food to make their victim sick, but not die. Just historically, women get away with murder a lot easier than men do, especially in an era when we didn't have the medical health care that we have. You have a sick child now that's not getting well, you take them to the doctor or to an emergency room. But back in the 1800s and early 1900s, you could just poison the child and people would feel badly for you. Oh my gosh, you know, she's just had so much bad luck with her. She's lost 5 or 6 of her family members. And did you hear her mother died last week unexpectedly? That made it very easy over centuries for women to get away with murder.
I'm Liz Merriweather. I'm the creator and executive producer of Hulu's new crime thriller, Furious. It's a show about an FBI agent, a female serial killer, and the different paths that they take to find justice and revenge. We have such iconic male serial killer characters in our minds. I was just really interested in complicating that narrative in Furious and really trying to show a killer who you're both feeling for and scared of. One of the reasons I always gravitate personally to watch these kinds of shows is the why. What can drive a person to kill another person? Women are so often underestimated and can really disappear in plain sight. I think that there aren't as many female serial killers, but in my darkest moments I sort of wonder if there are, but we just have never found them.
Now it's your turn. I don't know what to do.
Generally speaking, female serial killers have different motivation than male serial killers. Female serial killers are motivated by one of 3 things. The most common motivation is they do it for financial gain. Oftentimes they may be married and will have life insurance on their husband and kill him. And they do it over and over and over with a new husband. An infamous female serial killer motivated for financial gain is Dorothea Puente. Dorothea ran a boarding house in the Sacramento area, and she would rent out rooms. And she eventually started killing her tenants for the sole purpose of collecting their Social Security check. That Social Security check comes in, she cashes somebody else's check. There's her reward right there for killing again. She was eventually caught in 1988. On rare occasion, we will see a female serial killer that kill to have power and control over someone, or they are angry at the world and they want someone to pay for it. An example of a female serial killer motivated by power and revenge is Joanna Dennehy of Great Britain. Joanna is an interesting case because it's unusual for women to kill for that reason. There was no financial gain at all. And it appears that she saw herself as some kind of maybe avenging angel. But of course, that's nonsense. She was walking up to total strangers. One evening, she stabbed 2 men. They were walking their dogs in the park. Generally speaking, female serial killers victimize people that they know. I interviewed a female serial killer who was a healthcare killer. She was a nurse working in a very, very small rural hospital in Texas, Vicki Jackson. Part of her motivation was frustration and anger about her life, and she took out that negative energy on killing people, people who were dependent on her for care. Between the year 2000 and 2001, she is responsible for the murders of 10 of her patients. She would kill her patients by overdosing them with some kind of medication that she had access to. I've interviewed hundreds of people in my first career as a psychiatric nurse and then second as an FBI agent. And Vicki Jackson was the toughest nut to crack I ever talked with. She steadfastly refused to admit that she did what she was convicted of. Had she not been caught, God only knows how high the body count would be. The term profiling or profiler is a popular description. My certificate, upon completion of my training, does not say profiler. It says crime scene analyst, because that's where profiling begins, analyzing the crime scene. Of course, the autopsy is very, very important to know exactly what happened. And there's a lot to be learned from analyzing a crime scene. For example, when someone who is severely mentally ill, such as with schizophrenia or some other types of serious mental illnesses where they are hearing voices, when they kill someone, the crime scene is going to be very chaotic, messy. It's going to be a different crime scene. I was with my partner at a woman's house in suburban Chicago. She had been stabbed to death by an intruder. And my partner and I were there a couple of days afterwards. We're outside figuring out how did the guy get in, and a woman walks up to us with her little boy, who is about 4 years old. And I looked down at this cute little boy and who's got a crumpled newspaper in his hands. And he holds it up, and I think I said to him, "What have you got there, little man?" And I took it from him and I unfolded the newspaper. It was the murder weapon. I call it a Rambo knife. The blade was this long, bloody blade. She said he found it under his swing set. The reason this was important to us was it told us where the offender fled after he killed the victim. After a murder like that, the killer runs to safety. Home, he dropped the knife, probably panicked, and just got up and resumed running into that neighborhood over there, and he was eventually apprehended. Walking up to someone on the street, shooting them, and running away. There's not much of a crime scene there. When we're talking about serial killers, they're usually playing out some kind of fantasy they have. And the more chaotic and gruesome and horrible the crime scene is, such as blood smearing, evidence perhaps that the killer drank blood at the crime scene, that tells profilers a lot about the type of person they're looking for, and it also tells profilers this is going to happen again, maybe pretty soon. Back in the 80s, the FBI started a program, the Department of Justice, called the VICAP, VICAP, and it is a database where, let's say a detective is working on an unsolved murder in San Francisco, and he fills out all this information on a form. It goes to VICAP. It's put in the central computer. And a detective from Minneapolis does the same thing on a murder she's working on or he's working on and sends it into VICAP. And VICAP, well, wait a minute, we have an exact same bizarre behavior happen in San Francisco, and it looks identical to what happened here in Minneapolis. Could this be the same person? And the answer is yes, it could be. One of the things we do know about serial killers is they tend to travel for a variety of reasons. They don't want to draw attention to a particular area so that they can not be identified, elude capture. Sometimes female killers will relocate if they're a black widow and they are targeting a man who has something they want, money, things, land, and they kill him, they acquire everything, then they move on to another location and do the same thing again and again and again. Obviously, they do that so they are not drawing suspicion to themselves. Highly intelligent, methodical, organized serial killers, male or female, tend to not leave much evidence. Frequently, there's just a missing person report. The body isn't even found. Of course, that is not the case with healthcare killers and family mothers killing people in their family. It's more difficult for them to get away with it now than it was over 50 years ago because computerized systems can pick up things in the life insurance industry. And if one person is repeatedly buying life insurance policies on their kids and those kids are dying, it's going to get picked up. Healthcare killers, such as Vicki Jackson was, the crime scene isn't recognized initially as being a crime. It's an older person generally who died, and it's assumed, well, they're old, they're in the hospital because they're sick. These things happen, maybe a heart attack, a fatal stroke. So she didn't come under suspicion for quite a while until the body count started to get too high for a small rural hospital. Criminal profiling was developed by the FBI starting in the late 70s, early 80s. It is a way of looking at a crime scene and determining the type of person that committed that crime. Their lifestyle, their education, how they live, what kind of car they drive. Profiling is part art, part science. I was a profiler. I was trained at Quantico, and I worked with them, with John Douglas, Robert Ressler, Roy Hazelwood, the early founders of the profiling program. I worked with them on cases that were happening in the Chicago division where I was assigned, and secondarily, the San Francisco division. One of the things a good profile does is it draws a sketch, a personality sketch, and a lifestyle sketch of the unknown offender. Where do they live in relation to the victim? Are they employed? If they're employed, what type of job? Do they live in the neighborhood? Do they bring their own weapon? What we see a lot in male to female murders is strangulation. We rarely see strangulation as a method used by women when they kill. These are things police need to know to focus their investigation. And that's where profiling comes in. Studying hundreds and hundreds of similar types of crimes. Also, a critical component of developing a profile is a victimology. This victim, what kind of person were they? Were they a sex worker that walked the streets to get customers, or were they a Sunday school teacher who rarely left her house? One of those types is far more likely to be victimized than the other type. So the victimology is very important. Crime scene analysts do not go into the case with a preconceived idea. It's important to let the photographs speak for themselves and let the autopsy explain what happened. The crime scene will look different from the experienced, highly intelligent, highly organized military officer than a 16-year-old pizza delivery boy. One of them is going to be much more chaotic than the other. A profile of an unknown offender, generally speaking, addresses the gender of the killer, the approximate age of the killer, the education, the marital status and sexual history of the killer, if it's a sexually motivated crime, which we rarely see on female killers to a male victim. The interesting thing about serial murders is each murder by the killer tends to look like the previous murder. And the reason for that is murdering someone is fantasy-driven. And fantasy-driven murders tend to be ritualized. It's highly unusual for serial killers to change the method of murder. And every time they get away with murder or think they got away with it, their anxiety goes down. They feel good about themselves. Wow, I pulled that off. I think I'll do it again. Some serial killers have a cooling off period, could be weeks, months, years, before they do it again and again and again. And they get caught sooner. The VICAP system, Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, was implemented in the early 80s, and it is alive and well today. But it's only as good as the information that's put into it. Unless a murder happens on federal land or in a federal building, it comes under the purview of the state where it happens, and homicide investigators are in charge of it. But frequently they will ask the FBI because the resources are so vast. And some of that assistance might be to develop a profile of the unknown offender. Vicki worked in a small rural hospital. It didn't even have 100 beds. People were dying on the night shift at an unusually high rate. Yes, people sometimes check into a hospital and don't check out, but there's a predictable number. The problem that Vicki got herself into was she was very prolific. Too many people were dying on the night shift. She was the only nurse on duty, and people were dying at 3 or 4 times the rate. So suspicion landed at her doorstep. I never made an arrest where there weren't at least 2 or 3 other agents with me, usually bigger men. The day an FBI agent in training graduates from the academy, they are issued the gun they have been training with and handcuffs, and you always have those with you. Early in my career, I was assigned to surveil a house where a suspect lived. And this suspect, a middle-aged man from Eastern Europe, was suspected of being a hitman for an organized crime. I was with another young agent. The subject of the surveillance came out of his house. And I thought, we've got to stop him. We can't let him go. So my partner and I got out of the car. I thought my partner was right behind me. I draw my gun, pointed at the guy, halt, FBI, don't move. And I realized, where's my partner? He was back in the car calling the 2 agents that had left. Apparently I scared the guy quite a bit because when we were handcuffing him, he wet his pants. It happens. There has to be a certain amount of evidence indicating there is probable cause to believe that person committed that crime. And usually an arrest warrant is sought beforehand. Vicki Jackson was arrested almost a year after her last murder. It takes time to build a case properly, and arresting someone too soon can sink a conviction. I've interviewed many female killers, and almost every single one of them denied that they are actually guilty of the crime they were in prison for. The most important thing about an interview, a police interview, an interrogation interview, is preparation. What you want to do is get them nailed down to a statement that you'll catch them in a lie, an incriminating lie. The suspect is the last person interviewed, if they are truly believed to be responsible for the crime. I had a partner. He had been a Chicago homicide detective before he became an FBI agent, and we went to profiling school at the same time. Sometimes when we interviewed someone together, I would play dumb, like I was not very bright. And one of the things we found was that, especially if the suspect was a male suspect, that he would disregard that I was even in the room because I was just a dumb broad. If my partner left and then the room and I would start interacting with the suspect, he is seeing me as a stupid woman. And like, well, she's stupid. I could say anything. And it worked. We got a lot of information that way. I don't mind being considered stupid if it's a path to get the information. I've interviewed hundreds of people between my 2 professions, psychiatric nurse for 10 years and FBI agent. The only thing that made me nervous was fearing that I might not ask the right questions. but I got over that pretty quickly. I interviewed a male killer once who was on death row in Texas. In fact, 2 different men on death row in Texas. And one of them had been convicted of killing his girlfriend and her 2 sons while they were sleeping. His stance was he didn't do it. I guess he figured I hadn't read the file. And he, toward the end of the interview, hit me with a veiled threat. And just for a moment, so he's on the other side of plexiglass. The way he glared at me was unsettling. And I remember thinking, oh, I hope this guy never gets out. Because I was just there to chat. I didn't convict him, and he agreed to an interview. It was so menacing, the look. And for just a moment, I thought, if this is what his girlfriend and kids saw right before he killed them, yikes. Serial killers I'm familiar with tend to be deniers. Ted Bundy, who is one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, responsible for at least 30 murders, but the FBI thinks possibly over 100, maintained until 2 days before his execution date that he didn't do it. And he actually married a woman that was in the courtroom, and she had his baby. She believed him to the last minute until 2 days before his execution, he decided to talk. Vicki Jackson was a tough interview. She was not forthcoming. She was a denier. The police are wrong, the FBI is wrong, everybody's wrong. I didn't do it. I didn't. But I knew she did. The difference between Vicki Jackson and some other killers that I've interviewed is she had an air of defiance. And I remember her sticking her chin up. I didn't do it. I didn't do it, and with a little bit of anger. Whereas almost all of the other people I interviewed that denied the murder they were convicted of were like, I didn't do it. It was more like, poor me. The jury got it wrong. The prosecutor really had it out for me, but I don't know why. I didn't do anything. Whereas Vicki was, you're stupid. I didn't do this. Everybody's stupid but me. And that actually, if anything, helped me see, yeah, she's probably 100% guilty. Vicki was convicted of murder, multiple murders, in 2006 and sentenced to spend the rest of her life in prison. Juries are always advised the defendant has a right not to take the stand. Don't hold it against them, but they do hold it against them. Because if you are innocent, unless you are low IQ or mentally ill, you should be able to get on that witness stand, look at the jury and say, I did not do this. And so when you don't do that, juries are like, what am I doing here? I mean, you're on trial for your life, for your freedom, and you can't look at me and explain that you're wrongly arrested? Do people get convicted wrongly and go to prison? Yes. Not very often. There is one person I interviewed who was convicted of killing 6 people, a family, mom, dad, and 4 kids. That at the end of the interview, I thought to myself, this woman was wrongly convicted. She does not belong in here, because she said something about the case when we were talking that indicated to me she did it, but it was not a premeditated murder, and she absolutely does not belong in prison. She was being held as a sex slave and abused by the couple, and she didn't know anything about fires, but had reason to believe if she started a fire, the place would fill up with smoke, the fire department would come, everybody'd be rescued, and she could run away. But things didn't go the way she'd hoped. No prosecutors or governor's going to let her out. There are some crimes in America that the facts don't matter as much as the horror that the community feels. Some of them are where there's a high body count, Somebody's going to prison. They just want them put away. The major difference between male serial killers and female serial killers is that most male serial killers are fantasy-driven murders with a sexual component. Victims of female serial killers are killed for some kind of financial gain for the killer. Female serial killers, generally speaking, kill people in their tight circle, starting with family. It's hard to imagine someone, a mother, killing their own baby or their own little child, but it's a fact. Male serial killers are far more likely to target a stranger. Their motivation, they are fantasy-driven, a fantasy they have been nurturing since they were an adolescent, and their crimes are highly ritualized. I've interviewed some male killers and serial killers that were honest up front. Maybe they didn't tell me anything, but they admitted to the murders and why they did it. And then there are male killers that I've interviewed that were absolutely defiant and spent the entire 3 hours talking with me, trying to convince me that they were wrongly imprisoned. With women, I think some of the people I interviewed, including Vicky, their goal was to convince me they were wrongly convicted. The average killer in prison is not someone drooling at the mouth. They're not monsters. As such, have I interviewed some? Yes. And as difficult as it must be to accept that the person you're looking at in the mirror is a killer, still, there are certain crimes and certain people that I think even in their mid-80s in prison should never get out. There's no reason to believe, if they have the opportunity to kill again, that they won't. One of the first documented cases of a female serial killer is a woman who was royalty in Eastern Europe. She was the Countess Bathory. She was held in very high regard, and the village and the people there wondered what was happening to their daughters and sisters that would go to work in the castle and never be seen again. Well, she was killing them. Real serial killers generally are not as interesting as Hollywood makes them out to be. When Hollywood is doing a story of a female killer, she's usually pretty, charming, good verbal skills, and she's a trickster. She can get men into her bed easily, kill them and get away with it, but that's not how real life is. But we don't pay good money to see a movie that's boring about real life. A psychopath is a clinical term. Psychopath is under the category of a mental disorder known as antisocial personality disorder. If somebody is afflicted with this, they do not feel guilt about anything they did, hurting another person. They do not have remorse. And because they don't feel guilt, their crimes can become serialized. Guilt is a tremendously powerful motivator. If we feel guilty about something we did, the chances of us doing it again are pretty low, and maybe it's not going to happen again. But serial killers don't feel that guilt. In fact, they do anything they can to relive the moment. Sometimes they go back to the crime scene. Sometimes they make recordings or take pictures, take jewelry, or take something from the victim to remind them, like a prop in a play. And they don't feel guilt. So they do it again and again and again. For serial killers, prior to the age of 18, if a child is engaging in harmful behaviors to others and doesn't feel guilt and has a chronic disregard for other people, they are not diagnosed with antisocial personality. They're diagnosed with conduct disorder. The reason for that is the human brain is not fully developed until someone is in their mid-20s. To put that label on someone before their brain is even formed as an adult is unfair and be wrong, because there are cases of kids that were diagnosed with conduct disorder that grew out of it and became responsible adults that don't hurt other people. By the way, not everybody with that diagnosis hurts other people. They may be what's called a white-collar psychopath. They may be a thief. They may do bad things, steal, embezzle, that kind of thing, but they have no interest in raping or killing, torturing anybody. And that type of psychopath is more common than the violent kind. Insanity is not a clinical term, it is a legal term. And it means the individual, the accused, did not fully understand at the time they did the crime that it was a crime. For example, Richard Trenton Chase was the Sacramento vampire killer, absolutely, totally believed he had to replace the blood in his own body with the blood of someone that he freshly killed, or he would die. That's crazy. That is psychotic. He was not in touch with reality. For 10 years as a psych nurse, I worked with people who had to be hospitalized to protect two things: to protect them from being hurt on the outside, because mentally ill people living on the street are frequently attacked and violated. So it's to protect them, but it's also to protect society. There's only 3 reasons anybody's ever admitted to a maximum security psychiatric unit. They are either homicidal, or they are so gravely disabled because of their mental illness they cannot take care of themselves. Crimes committed by the mentally ill, especially schizophrenics, are very rare, but when they do, it makes headlines because the crime scenes are so bizarre. Having studied Vicki Jackson's crimes that she was accused and convicted of before I sat down with her, I was pretty well convinced she was a psychopath, or she wouldn't have done it 10 times. It was doing something for her. It was serving a need. If they feel guilt or remorse, they're not going to do it again. So I've never interviewed or studied a serial killer that was not a psychopath. And some of them are very open and honest, like, if you let me out, I'm going to continue killing. So don't let me out. The vast majority of serial killers, male or female, had terrible upbringings, bad parenting, neglect, abuse. Abuse can be physical, emotional, or sexual. We do see sexual abuse as a child in the histories of many killers. Every now and then, a killer will come along, a serial killer will be arrested, and a deep dive into their history and their family history and interviewing siblings and neighbors does not turn up anything. A couple of famous ones, Ted Bundy, yes, there was some unusual things in his childhood, but not abuse. And he started being a real serious problem when he was 12 years old. The kids in the neighborhood avoided him. They knew something was wrong. It's a little bit different with women. Women tend to be, little girls being abused or neglected tend to remain quiet about it. My first day of nursing school, I wanted to work with people that were mentally ill. I felt especially drawn to help someone that was having that much trouble getting through life through no fault of their own. So I graduated nursing school, and I eventually became a psychiatric nurse at Northwestern University Hospital in Chicago, where I, after many years, became head nurse at the Institute of Psychiatry. I was giving a community lecture on mental illness and mental health, and a gentleman came up to me and introduced himself, said he was an FBI agent, and he had been in the audience, and he said, "I think the FBI could use a woman like you." I remember looking at him and saying, "Well, in case you missed it, I'm a nurse." I didn't even know women could be FBI agents. The first female agent was admitted in 1972. One woman at the FBI Academy with hundreds of men. It turns out that night, I couldn't sleep. Well, I applied, and 4 months later, I was at the FBI Academy, Quantico, Virginia, and then went back to Chicago, and I began my 20-year career. About 4 years in to my career, I found out there was a rapist in my neighborhood where I just bought my first home. I wanted to get involved in the case. I was not a profiler. I was not trained. And I asked my supervisor, "Can I look into this and offer my services to the local police?" "Yes." And so I did that. He was eventually caught. It was known as the Burlington rapist. He was raping women as they got off the Burlington train in the western suburbs of Chicago. And then in 1984, I'd been an agent for 4 years. The behavioral science unit was just getting started. They wanted to have an agent in every field division, of which there's 57, to be trained by them to kind of be a liaison between the city where they were assigned, in my case Chicago, and the behavioral science unit at Quantico. And that's how it all got started. I worked a variety of cases. I was assigned to the Unabomber investigation, had nothing to do with profiling at all. We didn't know who we were looking for until David Kaczynski, Ted's brother, turned him in. So there was no profiling involved. Nothing prepared me more or better to be an effective FBI agent than having been a psychiatric nurse. They interact with people that are upset, are disturbed, are exhibiting behaviors that can be dangerous to them or to others. What was normal for me, dealing with people that are stressed out or ill or behaving badly or behaving crazily, that was no big deal to me. And there was one or two other agents in my class that had been homicide detectives or a detective on major police departments, and they, like me, were similarly prepared to be an effective agent. Interestingly enough, teachers, grade school teachers that become FBI agents do very well on the testing to get in, and they're pretty effective as agents. Why? Hey, if you can control a classroom of 10-year-olds, you can handle a bad guy. When I learned about profiling was when I was first at the academy to become a special agent. And John Douglas came into our class one day and was showing slides, crime scene photos, and I was horrified. Part of the reason is the vast majority of cases that lend themselves to profiling are the victims are women or children. Well, I'm a woman and I had a child. So a little too close to home, but I wanted to do it. I was aware of a psychological phenomenon known as desensitization. If you're exposed to something over and over and over, it doesn't have the same impact. Excessive exposure to it minimizes the response, and that is exactly what happened. And so there, at that point, once I mastered that problem, I was on my way. When I graduated the academy, went back to Chicago, I became aware that there were 8,000 agents nationwide, and I was the 404th female agent. Definitely male-dominated profession at the time. I didn't have any problem with it because I was raised with 3 brothers and no sisters. Dealing with boys, men or men acting like boys, was just common for me. There's no problem. A lot of teasing, sometimes jokes that weren't funny, things like that, but I just roll with it. Things have changed quite a bit for women and minorities in the FBI. It's no longer a novelty. For the last 30, 40 years, TV shows, movies are replete with female agents. Deadly Women was a show that I was asked to contribute to starting in 2005, and it's about women who kill. I created a show called Facing Evil. It was a prison interview show where I would actually sit down with someone convicted of murder and talk with them about their life, what happened, and that show went on for 5 years. I interviewed 36 people. My podcast, Killer Psyche, we discuss a murder, and then I go in an in-depth study of why did this person end up taking the life of another person? What went on in their life? And I love it.
Hi, I'm a producer on How Crime Works. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe and comment below with more ideas of topics you'd like us to cover in this series.
Their 1976 appearance on NBC's new sketch comedy program, Saturday Night Live. Roger Lynn was a valuable member of Leon Russell's team, not only for his musicianship, but also for his ability to tinker with electronic circuitry.
This is what pure neglect looks like. Look at this. This is not a powder coat BDS failure. This is purely neglect. We might be buying control arms. I don't know how to fix that. What a pile of shit. There are 3 steps that you need to take to officially get you to that dream truck you've been working hard for. Because, let's be honest, you probably noticed that your lifted truck on 35s is just like every other lifted truck on 35s. What can you do to make it stand out and actually grab attention? Good news, that's what we're doing in this video. And we're doing all of it with this truck. So we built this 2021 Silverado 1500 4 years ago. It's got a basic BDS 6-inch lift on it, some 22x12s and 35s. Now, we've done a few things along the way. We've added bumpers, all of the lighting. It's kind of pedestrian traffic at this point. It's 2026 now. So we're going to completely change this truck into something that actually stands out. We gathered our greatest minds and argued. Decided what color the truck should be, how tall we should go. Is it too tall? Do we really want that wide of wheels? One of the longest phases started, and eventually we figured it out, which is good because in 1 week we have to be at the Enthusiast Showcase. So it's off the whiteboard, starting with step 1. We broke it down into 3 easy steps. Obviously, we'll start with step 1. Be seen. Your truck's already lifted. It's already got some accessories, but nobody's looking at it, or maybe you can't see. Lighting is going to solve that. With our Silverado, for example, we've got the new front bumper with the 30-inch light bar, the cubes as fog lights, rock light kit, wheel light kit, the steps light up, the door handles light up, aftermarket tail lights, and we even added some rough country lights into the grille. In our example, that's already done. Bright colors. Any color underneath the truck is going to amplify it and draw your eye underneath there. Look at the red truck we just did. Yes, it matches the body color, but that truck draws your eye. Suspension's red, the truck is red. In this example, our lift kit's already done. What we can do is wrap it bright green. It may not be everyone's first choice of color to pick, but we knew this Diet Dew green wrap job would take our built truck to that next level. So before we even started putting our parts on and getting into steps 2 and 3, we sent it to FX Window Tinting and Wraps where we send all of our trucks to get wrapped. And no, you don't have to go so bold. There are plenty of other ways to wrap your truck or get color into it without changing the body color. Now that our green goblin truck is done, it's our turn to work on the truck, which means step 2. Step 1, complete. We've got all sorts of lighting. We got bright color on the truck. That's going to lead us into step 2. Step 2, be heard. Audio is a great move, whether it be bed speakers, a custom sub enclosure built underneath the seat. Now on our specific Silverado we have here, it does have a 10-inch somewhere under the back seat, so exhaust. Exhaust is probably one of the greatest ways to be heard. A loud, obnoxious exhaust that doesn't drone while you're driving is a great way to modify your vehicle. This happens to be a 3-liter Duramax with full emissions. We're not doing exhaust. Train horns. They're kind of the best way to be heard. Are they loud and obnoxious? Absolutely. But is it also really worth the money to mess with your buddies and scare the shit out of them with them? Absolutely. So, that is what we'll be doing on our Silverado here. And here is what we're gonna end up going with. So this is gonna be the Horn Blasters Spare Tire Delete Kit. It starts out with their Shocker XL horn kit, which is these 4 chimes here, a 2-gallon tank, their 3Q compressor, and it all gets mounted to this universal spare tire delete bracket. So all of this bolts to this, gets sucked up, replaces our factory spare tire, which is absolutely useless now, and they come with all the wiring, all the hardware, everything we need. So I am going to put all of this together here on the bracket, and then we'll throw it up in the truck. This is actually a really easy kit. We've done a couple of these. We've never done a video, I don't think, on them. They're a great kit. Horn Blasters are a very well-known company, especially in the train horn industry. So excited to put this together and show you guys what we got. All right guys, so we got our train horn kit pre-built here. It gets a little tricky because all of the airlines do need to be equal length going to the horns, so we had to get creative there. We got a lot of loops. On these, I like to have everything be able to disconnect right at the train horn bracket so that to take it out of the truck if it needs to be serviced or anything like that, can easily go underneath there, unplug everything right there and drop it instead of running our wires all the way up. We're to a point now where we can actually test fit it in the truck. We'll see where we need to put our bump mounts and then a lot of wiring. A little bit of wiring complete. We're done with step 2. We've got the most obnoxious way to be heard, but hey, you're gonna hear it. Let's bring the whiteboard back and see what step 3 has in store for us. All right, we've added train horns to our truck. Now we have exhausted just about every accessory you could possibly think of to add to your vehicle. So once you've done all of those, what could we possibly have for step 3? There's only one thing left. Be bigger. We're going with a bigger lift, bigger wheels, and bigger tires. Bigger lift, going from a 6-inch to a 9-inch. We're gonna pull out the 6-inch BDS to make room for all the bigger stuff. Now, since we're taking it off just to go bigger, there's nothing wrong with the kit, there's nothing wrong with the wheels and tires. We can clean them up, sell them, pay off what you just did in your upgrades, or use it for more upgrades down the road. It's basically free money is what I'm getting at. We might be buying control arms. I don't know how to fix that. It's spun inside the cam.
Oh, I can feel it. It's gross.
There. That was a close fall. This is what pure neglect looks like. Look at this. I've taken BDS kits off that were old, and I've never seen this much powder failure. Like, this is not a powder coat BDS failure. This is purely neglect in poor conditions. Extremely poor conditions. The condition of that bushing sums up what the entire underside of this truck looks like right now. And because we already had a lift in this, we got everything taken out. It's already pre-cut. There's not a lot we have to do, but there are a few things that we need to address before that the BDS kit didn't need that now going to a 9-inch McGoy's we're gonna have to do. So let's get into that, start getting this kit thrown in the truck. So we're immediately running into an issue. Our BDS kit had a new bracket with a new piece of hardware to bolt the diff in. Our McGoy's kit actually wants to use the factory hardware, which we no longer have. Big difference is BDS bolt is 4.5 inches long, factory bolt was 7.5 inches long. So we're a little short, but nothing a trip to the hardware store can't solve, so we'll get a new bolt for that and be on our way. All right, so here is our new lift kit. This is the 9-inch McGoy's SS kit, which stands for stainless steel. So you'll see all of these parts have stainless steel inserts, upper control arms, our front compression struts, and our cross member is also gonna have stainless inserts. These are all gonna be a nice gloss black powder coat, skid plate, everything is in a really nice high-end finish. Now this kit is actually adjustable from 7 all the way to 9.5 inches. The way they're gonna achieve that in the front is we got our new McGoy struts. Every spacer we add is gonna add a 1/2 inch of lift. These are actually gonna go underneath our factory coil spring. The more we compress it, the more lift we get. Ooh. Wow. How did anything even get added?
Just how crusty the top center bolt is from being completely encapsulated in a top hat.
So we're gonna leave all of these in. We're gonna run 9.5 inches in the front. We've got our new front and rear cross members, our new skid plate. We hung our factory lower control arms that we just hit with some gloss black spray paint so they didn't look so rusty and crusty compared to this nice brand new lift kit. Out back here we actually have the compression, these are called compression struts. Some people just think they're called front tracker bars. All these are is to stabilize, because this is such a large drop, that this gives it some stability in the front end.